here's the thing, and I had said this, and then I saw Angus Young say the same thing. The feeling that I got when I went to see my first concerts when I was 13 and 14 years old, Madison Square Garden, the impression that they had on me is I try and tap into that feeling when I'm on stage and try and give that feeling to the audience. I'm not always successful at it. And not everybody in the audience is a 14-year-old kid like me, but I'm at least trying to tap into what I felt when I watched a band when I was that age, and not just think, what's in catering tonight, and what's the gross, and what's our net tonight, and how long's the bus ride. I try and forget all that crap and just put myself in that headspace that I was at when I was 14 years old.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of 2020. I'm Corey Peza here, as always, with Siobhan Cronin and Benny Goodman, and we're super pumped to welcome back one of our earlier guests. We haven't had him on in a while, but he's an absolute legend. That's Steve Stevens.
Yeah, it's awesome. And he's so down to earth. I love how cool he is. You would think that, he's such a superstar, obviously. Got to tune into the YouTube. Always got his shades on. Now living in Vegas. We talk a lot about the residency that he's doing there and some of his other projects. Talk a lot about songwriting and guitar playing in this epised.
Yeah, he can live in Vegas all he wants, but he's still a New York Jew, and I love him for it.
As we reference many times.
He's the greatest guy as far as, like, if you go and watch all of our episodes, he's about as down to earth as they come for being a legend.
It blew my mind the first time he came on to hang out with us, and it blew my mind again that he actually came back and seemed to actually enjoy himself and open up about, a lot of stuff that's going on and his actual songwriting process, the new Billy Idol stuff. Like, it's pretty incredible. If you're a fan of Billy Idol, Steve Stevens, you're not going to want to miss this one.
Like and subscribe at 2020-d.com. Listen now for Steve Stevens.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Benny Goodman. I'm here with my friends, Siobhan and Corey, and I'm very excited because when we have people come back for a second time, especially when they're legends, like when I legit had like posters of them on my wall growing up and reasons I play guitar, it's amazing to me. And this guy is about to hit Vegas hard with a guy named Billy Idol, but he's bigger than that. His name's Steve Stevens, and let me just tell you, just his silhouette as he's walking on stage lets you know you're about to be in for a fucking show. Hi, Steve. How are you?
Hey, what an intro. Thank you.
Right. Well, it's a rare opportunity because we had you on the show before. So for anyone that's tuning in just now, go listen to part 1 and part 2 with you. It was an awesome interview. So I'm excited for us to get maybe a little more topical this time and get into some of the stuff that you're doing now. As Ben mentioned, you started or about to start a Vegas residency. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. COVID sort of put the kibosh on it for last year, but we've been doing Vegas residencies probably 6 or 7 years now. We moved around. We were at Palms, and then we were one of the House of Blues, and now we're at the Cosmopolitan, which is actually the theater there is the best that we've done there. Sound and lights are incredible, and we really we dig playing there. So and I live in Vegas, so I get to sleep. Okay. Yeah, I sleep in my own bed. So I'm all for it.
In terms of the residency, like versus tour, like what do you really enjoy about that side of performing?
Well, your crew is happier because they're not having to load in and load out, and they could get drunk after the show. Crawl out of bed about 3 or 4 like the rest of us, and but it gives you an opportunity to really hone in on your show because it's consistent. So sound and lights are going to be the same every night, we tend to dig into some of the more obscure tunes, B-sides and things like that, because you have a lot of people who will come in for, we do 2 shows a week, and they'll come in for both shows. So we don't want to replicate the same show each night. So it gives us a chance to, dig into some other tunes that we don't ordinarily play, or some covers. there might be an Elvis song lurking around. It's a tradition. So it's cool. It's different, and touring is a whole different thing. This is a lot more kind of contained, a bit more theatrical, not as raucous sometimes. Depending how much they've drank,
Yeah, I was going to ask because I feel like the Vegas audience is very special because so many people are coming in, they're tourists and they're there for entertainment. They're out like having a night on the town. So I was curious to hear how maybe the performance is altered or changed, or if you do that at all to sort of cater to the audience, or if you call any audibles based on what the audience is doing that night.
No, I mean, we don't take requests.
Well, sure, of course.
But I will tell you, we used to do the meet and greets after the show, and we had to stop doing that because, folks were totally inebriated by that time. They've just been through a show. They've drank through it. And so we said, well, we better do the meet and greets before the show. So
that's a good call.
So can you talk about Vegas? Because I feel like Vegas is a different world. I mean, I've been there a bunch. I mean, and it's a cool place. It's in the middle of the desert. And the great thing is you walk down and first, the thing that I think of first is how expensive is the electric bill to run this place? Because you'll walk down the street and it's like, here's Aerosmith. Here's Billy Idol. Here's Britney Spears. Do you think she's gone crazy? She's here.
Right,
and it's like, and then by the way, you can go have the greatest steak, beautiful lobster dinner. And it's like, it's all in the middle of this like beautiful fantasy world. What's it like? You said 7 years or something in Vegas and you're living there now. Can you speak to like the Vegas vibe?
I will say that living in Vegas is entirely different than coming to play a show. Because you've come to play a show or whatever, you're there to party and you're there to party hard. But living here is, I'm at the base of the Red Rocks Mountains. So my wife and I go camping, believe it or not. Brooklyn boy goes camping.
That's awesome.
And hiking and all this, it's absolutely beautiful. And it's a totally different, I didn't know that this side of Vegas existed. I had some friends that had moved out here, actually a number of friends, and they said, come out and, we'll take you around and we'll show you what it's like to live here. So there's two extremely different sides of Vegas. There's the party town, and then there's the Vegas people, which are, there's farms and desert so far we really like living here. It's a bit quieter for us, and we dig it. So far so good.
Yeah, that's us. I've had a lot of friends or just heard of a lot of musicians that have relocated there, and it seems like that's very much a thing. I think it seems like a lot of the Vegas natives at this point, or a lot of musicians or people working in entertainment, living sort of on the outskirts.
Yeah, exactly. And there's an arts district now, and there's things you discover. I mean, I'm a New York Jew, and we love Chinatown, and there's a great Chinatown, and like there was in Los Angeles. So you discover all these pockets, different areas that I didn't know that there was a whole Asian section or whatever,
Well, our mutual friend Paul Geary, I think he moved to Summerlin, and I went out there. And First off, my fiance had never been to Vegas, and I loved Summerlin so it was so chill. She got mad at me for not going into town and going around. Like, this is so relaxing because it's like the Beverly Hills of Las Vegas, where it's like it's not these beautiful neighborhoods. It's like nice and open. And by the way, if you do go to the Red Rocks, like it's Joshua Trees, like the U2 album, and then it's just beautiful. But just don't go in the sun for too long because that's not metal, you'll die.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I live in Summerlin as well, so
I figured. Is Billy Gibbons like your next door neighbor? Do you guys like change hot sauces?
Almost. I was looking at a house years. Man, this has been in the works for a while for this move to Vegas. So there was a time we were still doing our previous residency, and I looked at a house. And I was ready to put a bid in on it, and then it fell through, and COVID hit, and then I found out Billy Gibbons bought the house across the street. Oh, so I would have been his neighbor, but no, he lives in a different part of town.
Man, that's a really rock and roll part of town. We got Steve Stevens over here. We got the guy from Extreme. Well, he doesn't count. And then we have Billy Gibbons, the fucking Rev. No, I'm kidding. I love Paul. I'm just giving him shit. And by the way, he's a legend just because he represents Joe Perry. So like there's all these guitar players and then there's Joe Perry. I mean, the Rev is right up there for me. I mean, that guy.
And Corey Taylor, he lives here. And I mean, there's a lot of musicians here in town. So, it's, and I'm still I'm averaging, once every 6 weeks, I go into Los Angeles and do work and sessions and whatever it requires. And so it's close enough, but yet a little bit removed.
Yeah, LA's way better. It's like my mom. She's better from 60 miles away. Love her. Just don't want to live next to her. She's a Jewish mother. You should understand this. So like, she probably is watching this and she's like, oh, that's so cool. He talked to that guy with gray hair. So how's everything going with you guys? I know you have a new EP out and it sounds awesome, dude. But so I have to ask, it's an EP. Right. Are albums dead? Are we releasing songs one at a time, a few at a time now? Because that's just what we do as musicians.
There was no like grand scheme, plan. We actually, this is the second EP, and we'll be doing another one. What happened was COVID hit, and we were already slated to start recording with. Previous EP was produced by Butch Walker. And we said, well, Butch is kind of like a self-contained entity. He engineers, produces, plays every friggin' instrument in the world, and co-writes. Had his studio at that time in LA. So I said, well, let's just quarantine the three of us, and we'll do this. We'll record. And it worked out really well. And the idea of putting out songs closer to the release, you finish the tune. You master it, and within 3 weeks, it's out to your audience, and it's fresh. Whereas, back in the old days, you do a record, and it would be 6 to 8 months by the time the machinery got going, and the pressing, and the press, and you've recorded these songs 8 months ago, and they're, So this for us, it's more immediate, and we're really picking the 4 best songs. Each time, we might go in and record, or demo up 10 songs, and the audience is getting the best of what we're doing. So I really like this kind of format to get your music out quicker and quality. And so the latest EP was produced by Tommy English and Zach Cervini. And it's a bit more hard hitting than the previous one. And, hey, man, the proof is in the pudding. We had an awesome time doing it. And the audiences, we just finished 3 months on the road. We're playing, quite a number of these new songs, and the audience are really digging them. So I think we're on a good roll here,
Yeah. What does that process look like now when you finally get into a room all together? Are you coming in with like, bits and pieces here, and everyone's throwing in like, oh, I like that one, I don't like that one? Or are you coming in with fully kind of constructed ideas? Like how much collaboration is going into that, especially with producers?
We don't go in with anything because we're working with really strong co-writers and the idea, sometimes when you have an idea that somebody's bringing in, it's kind of, they fleshed it out and other people can feel not part of the process. And Billy and I, we've been writing now together for 40 years and we kind of know what each of us is going to bring to the table. So it's kind of cool to get in a room with a couple other songwriters and see what happens, because they'll add things that I never would have thought of, or Billy wouldn't have thought of. And it kind of, one of the things we try not to do is replicate, things that we've done before. We definitely don't want to write Rebel Yell again. We already, we've done that. We got that. We play it every night. Yeah. But sometimes, the cats that we're working with now are able to, like, they're fans, and they're able to say, oh, let's take a spirit of Rebel Yell and interject it into something we would have never expected. So we're cool with that process, and we're cool with accepting other people's input. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's amazing that your music has gone to like the vernacular of other musicians. Because if you say like inject the spirit of Rebel Yell, right. I know what it means. Corey knows what it means. Siobhan knows what it means. Like you've become ubiquitous with that. So like I understand not wanting to necessarily do the same thing over and over and over. So when you say you want to keep things fresh and you're writing with all these writers, what does that feel like? What is fresh? Because like there's a lot of people that don't understand this writing process. You're going and writing with these, ghost writers or these producers that are great co-writers. Right. But to us plebeians that don't go in the room with these amazing award winners, what's that like? Like, are they psychiatrists? Are they sitting here going, here's heart and soul. Let's change this and make it catchier.
Thankfully, they're not psychiatrists because we'd get nothing done. So, what did your dad do when you were 3 years old? No. You know what it's like? It's like having, that person or persons join your band for those weeks that you're writing with them. They're like another band member, and most writers, can play an instrument or they can jump on the drum kit so it's just like having another band member. It's not, I think the days of the bringing in the song doctors in the 90s or whatever, which we never did and we were always against because this just didn't sit with us. This is a totally different process. These people are just musicians that are really good writers. And in some cases, like Butch Walker he's a hell of a guitar player, man. So the two of us, when we work together, we're just two guitar geeks geeking out over pedals and gear and hey, man, what about, you ever hear that Tommy Bolin record? Yeah, man. What about that third track? What if we took a solo like that? We're just fans, man. They're just other musicians.
That's great.
I think that really speaks though to it's great to hear you say that because I always considered, developing your style like a buffet. You know what I mean? It's not like I don't like imitating in the sense that like, oh, you sound like a Hendrix clone or a Stevie Ray Vaughan clone or a Randy Rhoads clone. But it's always like you walk down, you're like, okay, I like that diminished thing that Randy used to do. Right. I like the finger tapping thing. The flamenco thing, I'm going to steal that from the Stevens guy. But then it becomes you. Yeah. And Tommy Bolin, amazing. Right? But like, I bet you 99.99% of the people that see you have no idea what the fuck you're talking about. So you're even though to you, it's like, it's a part of the buffet, you're keeping it alive.
Yeah. It does flip me out a bit because young kids, now I don't know, I didn't really delve into my dad's record collection. It was a different era, us baby boomers, we rebelled against everything that our parents liked, all that.
You didn't like Voya con Dios?
Yeah, we were all, once Jimi Hendrix showed up, it was like, fuck you, Dad. These are our guys, Zeppelin and Hendrix and all that. But I find with kids now that are playing guitar, they kind of rediscover their parents' music in a way. So I have a lot of kids who are asking me about, not just the early Billy Idol stuff or the Generation X stuff, but they're asking me about like progressive rock groups from the 70s. And I'm like, how the hell do you even know what that is? So I guess it's just all, like you said, it's a buffet and kids are tapping. I hate to say kids because we're all just guitar players, but they're aware. I think also because a lot of the guitar magazines do profile stuff that came well before the readers, so they're kind of discovering it. It's all it's cool because I didn't have that as a kid. All I had was what was I think my band influences. I wasn't even listening to the Beatles at that time because that was kind of it was before me. I was really a 70s rocker kid. Probably the same stuff that whenever I read interviews with 80s guitar players, Van Halen or whatever, we're all talking about Cream and Hendrix and, Zeppelin and Montrose and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of cool that kids are going back even, for that stuff.
Well, it seems like it just in general, pop culture is reaching back and doing more so that. And one great example is Top Gun. I mean, look at what's what's going on now with like throwing back, not only music, but also just general like pop culture and things from that period that now, because of the way that the internet works and the way that social media goes, kids are discovering these things for the first time. And it's almost like it's as cool as it was the first time around with all the remakes and everything.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I was in, my wife and I were in Urban Outfitters, and there's a whole section of Ed Hardy. And I'm like, Ed Hardy?
I haven't seen that in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah, we stopped wearing that in about 91, 92. But it's all cyclical, I guess. It's things come back. And
it's funny you say that, because there's a lot of guitar players, and I know that like when we had Nuno Betancourt on the show, he laments that obviously there's all these guys that since the day, and girls, since the day they were born, they've had the internet and they've been shown Eruption and they've been shown these crazy techniques. So then you see this 6-year-old playing like all this crazy stuff that you're like, oh, Satriani's like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
But now that's all available and you can have that technique. The question is, how do you get the sound like you're banging the guy's girlfriend and you smell like the cigarettes in the club? Like the 5-year-old in Japan doesn't know what it's like to be up for 3 days and live in a haunted castle, and that comes through in their guitar playing because it's too meticulous and perfect. So it's like they have to go back and find the Tommy Bolin record and be like, oh, there's noise on this. Maybe I need to get that effect to add the noise.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm in a parallel universe, man, when I hear all these stories.
Well, I mean, look, we all started as bedroom guitar players. But from the time I was about 16 or 17, I joined a band because that was the blueprint. You join a band and you go out and play, and you suck for about a year or so. And your drummer sucks, and you find another drummer.
Only a year? Only a year?
Yeah, that's pretty quick.
I didn't have much patience. So, all right, 2 years. We sucked for 2 years.
Fair.
But you got in front of an audience and you played, and you realized what audience, because it's important to, as well as being proficient on your instrument, you have to connect with people. It's not just about how ambidextrous you are, or it's not some circus trick or something. You have to connect with people, and if you're in a band and you write original music, well, your guitar parts and your solos have to reflect what the song is about and all that. And the only way to do that is to sweat it out in a rehearsal room and go out and play. And that's the missing element in the kind of YouTube bedroom guitar players who are very proficient, and they haven't. Some of them haven't taken that next step to getting in front of the audience and performing.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I find myself scrolling past things too, and I'm like, oh, but this person's obviously amazing. But yeah, I mean, that is a huge element now that you can kind of produce anything from your bedroom and release a full album without ever, seeing the light of day in front of an audience. So that makes a lot of sense.
I see these techniques and I go, oh my God, that's incredible. Like, like Stanley Jordan did the two neck thing, and it's incredible. But then these people have taken, and Michelangelo Badio, those guys did this crazy thing. But now there's like people that take it to the next level. They're hitting things, they're turning it inside out. Like they're playing multiple instruments and they're harp guitars. And man, I respect it. I can understand how great it is. And the first thing I think to myself is, but why?
Get off my lawn. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm an old man. I'm like, I don't need to hear a harp guitar version of Imagine where the guy's hitting these extra strings at the top going like it's like that Hydra guitar that Steve Vai plays. That's amazing, but it works for one song. It is a thing. It's more of like, look at how fancy I am versus like, how good is your songwriting? Like, Get me John Lennon and Paul McCartney. Give me just a beautiful, weird note here and there, and I'm happy. Like, you don't have to be doing polyphia as much as I respect it.
Those guys did that already. It kind of comes back to, like, there's got to be some sort of innovation in guitars.
Fuck all these new people. They suck. Everything after the Beatles and Zeppelin. Zeppelin was good. I agree with Steve. The 70s stuff was good, but I feel like maybe after Billy Idol in the 80s, it just fell off.
I mean, I just, the stuff that the examples and as I said, the blueprint that you grew up with is what's in your head. And for me, guitar playing was always a vehicle for the singer and the song. And it's still, my number one job still has never changed. Working with Billy is always, well, what's the song? And does it need first of all, does it need a solo? Is it going to enhance the song? And what should the solo represent? I will tell you that the better I say this from the experience of, starting with amplifiers, that didn't have master volumes and all that you had a doctor. The better the guitar sound, the less notes you have to play, because you want to let that sound breathe and become an organic thing. If you just plugged into some computer plug-in and it's this generic sound, well, then you're just going to go, okay,
well,
that's
let's ask
enough.
about that, because I have to be honest with you. I have a whole room over there, not pictured, of about 25 stack amps. Relatively impressive. I think you might actually appreciate it, Steve. And then one day, this dude, Corey, came over to my house with a Kemper. And we compared my 5150 big block, which is a badass amp. It eats amps. It eats Marshalls. It eats Soldanos. It's an incredible amp. And I had it through a Mesa with like 3 different microphones, all in phase. It's beautiful. He brings up a Michael Britt plugin. Plugs in direct. And no matter how hard I tried, it still sounded better, like a keyboard, just where I turned up the volume on my damn Kemper. And I said to myself, holy shit, all these amps are stupid. But this is when I knew I saw the end of the world. Barry Goudreau from Boston. I love him. One of the reasons I play music. I'm from Boston. I love Boston. Tom and Barry, they're the sound. They're the greatest sound. Barry comes over to my house because he's going to record a solo, and he sees all my Marshalls, and I plug him into my Kemper. He goes, why wouldn't we? I'm confused. And I understand. Why wouldn't we plug into that? And I'm like, no, just plug into this. This is going to sound better. It's cleaner. It doesn't have any noise. And he was upset. He's like, but there's no soul in these. And then I so I go to a different plugin and patch. And he's like, okay, the profile. He goes, that kind of sounds like me. Then I go to another. Oh, wow. That sounds like me. Corey was sitting right there. And I'm telling you, man, I feel like I've seen the chess master get beaten by the machine, and now I'm fine with the machine.
Right.
How do you feel about those things? Because I realize that what you're saying was true a few years ago. No, a few years ago is right. Plugging in a guitar rig was stupid and it sounds dumb. Get your Plexi. It's always going to sound better. But then Corey came over with the damn Kemper, and now I'm confused.
I do use plugins sometimes if I'm writing, because it's very quick. And they do give you the flexibility of changing your guitar sound as the song progresses, because you're not stuck with what you printed. But I will say I use amplifiers. I've not found a way to get my sound out of a pure plugin. Now I do use cabinet. I don't use live cabinets anymore because I work with a company called 3 Notes, and we just captured all of my vintage cabinets in the studio. We went over to the Foo Fighters studio and captured them, and with all the vintage microphones. And now
So you stole the souls of your amplifiers of all the cabs, just like the Kemper. So it's like the containment unit.
I'm still using my amplifier live.
Right. So only one part of it is the stolen soul, and the rest of it's the real thing. But you are essentially doing the inverse of that, which is you're taking the cabinet, because you don't want to bring out that heavy Dumble cabinet. Why do that when you can just steal it from Dave?
Well, you know what would happen is, especially when you're on a festival, there's 20 bands, your cabinets there, the mics get bumped, it gets moved, it's not the same every night. So I thought, well, I need to eliminate that error, that shit going on. So we just and I went out in the house and I set up my cabinets with my microphones, and we A/B'd it against the captures, and the captures won. So that, my ears, I'll go with wherever my ears say, hey, if a year down the line the plugins sound better than my amps, I'm going to use the plugins because I don't care. Kempers are great. There are bands out there using Kempers that sound incredible. I mean, Metallica uses fractals but you know what? They have a guy who goes through that shit with them and hones it in and probably helps capture the exact sounds that were on the recordings.
Well, you named it though, but that's why you are awesome with an amp, because you have a sound guy. Corey and I, we're carrying in our own amps. We're like, hey man, do you know that the 57's facing that way? The guy's like, I don't speak English. You know what I mean? So so you get to dial that in. Whereas like I bring a Kemper, which I don't even play anymore because I don't even go to the outside world. But it's just like, turn the volume up, dude. That's it.
Yeah,
turn
it
up.
They're tools, man.
I get it. And you know what was the deciding factor certainly is, I was carrying 4 cabinets on the road with me, and gets down to the logistics of, you need a big enough truck. That's going to add up to, when you start looking at how much it costs to tour, gas, what size truck do you need? How many guys are going to move it? It comes down to dollars and cents, and a lot of these younger bands, man, they can't afford to bring this stuff out with them. It's simply, economics has made a lot of this in the box stuff happen.
Do you think that anyone's going to have you do an intervention with Yngwie and say that you don't need to bring, because he lets everyone know that every one of those Marshalls is real, which is amazing because he has the craziest Marshall. It's like, kitchen Marshall. He shouldn't be bringing these on the road. As a Jewish mother, it makes me upset. Like, leave them in your studio, dude. You're playing crappy places. Stop it. But like, do you think that that's crazy at this point to be bringing out like a wall like that?
That's Yngwie. It's, if that's what
is it
makes
his
him,
brand?
He's over the top, of course.
There's 2 things you got to have if you're Yngwie Malmsteen in order of priority: a smoke machine and a wall of Marshalls. I get
the
it.
machine comes first.
Yeah,
I get it. Yeah, I get it.
Well, speaking of, going back to songwriting briefly, when you're going in to record a new song or an EP or come with ideas, are you immersing yourself in other things that are different from stuff that you've played before or listened to before in order to kind of get yourself out of your habits or your headspace?
Man, YouTube is incredible because I'm discovering artists, musicians, and biographies on painters, anything that I can watch that's going to inspire me or spark an idea or something. And I find that I'm discovering stuff and maybe bringing those elements into what I'm doing, even subliminally, that maybe I never would have thought about before. So those are the kind of things. I very rarely listen to current guitar music or albums unless somebody says you have to hear this record, or a friend of mine has done. Great example, Robert DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots.
Love him. Awesome, right? Dude.
So he has a new solo record he sent me, and I know Robert, and I know the musicality. I know what he's brought to that band. So, I'm going to immerse myself in it, and that's been what I've been listening to, stuff like that, But I very rarely do. I don't go on iTunes and look at what's current and on the iTunes rock chart or something.
But isn't that like doing what you get paid for? Because it's like, okay, like I used to think people that didn't listen to music in their car were psychopaths. And now that I'm in a studio all day tracking and listening to music and mixing, I just want to
sweet silence. Sweet
yeah.
silence.
Yes.
So it's the same thing. It's like, you play guitar all the time. In fact, you're a guitar hero. So it's not to say that you're being ignorant. It's just you're at a point where you're still just doing your thing. So what's the point of having to go and stay current? I appreciate people that want to stay current and all that sort of stuff, but I like that you're Steve Stevens being Steve Stevens, because that's kind of like what you should be, I feel like.
I'll tell you a funny story. Was I was rehearsing for this tour down South America, Rock and Roll All Stars, and Billy Duffy from the Cult was one of the guitar players. So I needed a lift back to Hollywood. I'll give you a ride, Steve. Okay, we get in his truck. We're driving. He turns on the radio. It's classical music, and he goes, I hope you don't mind my classical music. This is what I like to listen to. And I'm like, I get it. I totally get it. It's like, I will listen to something. I mean, most of the time in my car, I listen to comedy, and that's what my wife and I enjoy doing. We go to comedy clubs a lot. I don't go to see bands that often, unless it's friends of ours or something. But I try and get away. Like you said, you got to get away from it sometimes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wasn't trying to say, stay current. Ben maybe misunderstood what I was saying. But yeah, as someone that isn't strong in songwriting, I'm always curious how people, get out of the ideas that they're always getting, and it's interesting going to see art or listen to comedy or something that's completely unrelated can inspire that as well. Absolutely.
Or films. Films are great because, songwriting is very similar to watching a film because they build in peaks and valleys, and like there's a Denzel movie, and he's just a shootout, and the fighting, and all this crap is going, and all hell's breaking loose, and then right after it, it's this lull of the music, kind of chills. Guys laying on the ground, they're dead. It's he saved the girl or whatever. So it's like a chorus and a verse. I see things very similarly. So films also affect me, and I love film music as well.
I can relate to this completely as well, and I'm sure Corey can. When you do so much production, you start to understand the way things break down. So you're like, okay, they had to have done this scene this way, and like because you've removed the Wizard of Oz veil, and you kind of like reverse engineer it. You're like, how would they do that? But because you work in the studio, look, nonlinear editing is nonlinear editing. So it's like you can appreciate. I mean, I know there's a lot of technical elements of movies and things that I absolutely appreciate more because I sit and I point a microphone at a cone.
It's funny that you compared songwriting to like film, and I think that's 100% accurate. And one of the biggest things I've learned as a producer and working with other songwriters and people that come into my studio for help with what they're working on is explaining that like, all right, you wrote a really cool song, it's cool riffs, cool lyrics, everything, but we got to make sure it tells a story. And that kind of sounds like pretentious. It could be like, you got to tell a story with music. But if you really break it down, like, no, you need a peak and a valley. You need dynamic shifts. You need to take the person listening on a ride so that when they get to the end of the song, they want to get back on. And looking at it as a film, I think helps people visualize something that has no visuals, right? So that's a really important point and a great way of looking at it, in my opinion.
Well, that's, it should tell a story, and that lends. That's exactly why when I'm recording or whatever, and somebody or engineer or whatever will say, "Oh, should I copy that?" Let's say I've just recorded the first verse. Oh, should I? And they're used to doing this. They copy it, and I go, "Well, if we're telling a story, the way that I'm going to play the last verse is not going to be the same after they've already heard two choruses and a bridge. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to do some embellishments. I'm building towards the end." It's the same as acting. They don't act. The actors are the same at the beginning of the story as they are after they've lived through this, whatever the film is about. So those are things, that I, as I tell people recording, don't cut and paste. Don't cut and paste your parts or your vocals or anything. It just doesn't. It's doesn't work.
I think it's true, and it's along the same ideas of what you're saying. Is I think it became a trend, the cut and paste thing, because it was like, oh, well, we want people to, especially like pop music, that style, we want people to make sure they can sing along with every chorus, and that we don't want to confuse them. But now I feel like if you don't break away from that, those songs become stale very quickly. No matter how big of a hit you write, if it's cut and paste, every time someone listens to that song, they've heard the chorus 3 times. If they listen to the song, it's twice. I've heard it 6 times, and there's no change. So why would they listen to it again? So by having those variations,
You brought up a problem, Corey, because there's so many people, and we've seen this with some serious producers, man. Like, in fact, Corey and I have been horrified by some of the things that we've seen where they're just like, but can't you just Pro Tools that?
Yeah.
I know he almost spit it out. Can't you just Pro Tools that? Yeah. And it's like, first off, I play things a million times because every time I play it, it gets better and I get more upset at myself. Now I'm playing it with more anger, and apparently I sound better that way. Whereas other people are just like, oh, I know you hit the wrong note, but you hit it like well enough that I can now use Melodyne and just put it, and then we can just copy it to the every other chorus. And it makes this homogenized music that has no feel to it. And but do you think that that's making people lazier in the sense that we're not getting better because we're using these tricks to just phone it in all the time?
I see a definite trend getting away from that. I think when everybody could, have accessibility to Pro Tools and they could do that, everybody went crazy doing cut and paste. I will say in the last, year that I've worked with engineers and producers, they're avoiding that. They're getting away from it. So I think there's definitely moving away from that.
Yeah. It's like the pendulum's coming back because, like you said, it was such a, going from tape to computers. It was like, oh, we have all these options and we can really work with this. And then you kind of had to find that threshold of like, all right, maybe that was a little too much and bringing it back. And now people want to get more.
Yeah, I mean, look, it used to be really, if I worked with a singer or whatever back in the day, and having to get per song a great vocal performance. You sometimes had to kill the guy to sing the song, 12 times, and then you cut and then you edited it, right? You picked the best bits of it. By the time the guy sang it 10 times, he's already thinking about his pitch, he's thinking about timing, and he's forgetting about just the inspiration. So if you get that initial vocal take and you just need to fix a couple of things, but keep the integrity of the performance, I think that's a good thing. Just, you don't want to auto-tune a rock singer to death.
Well, comping it, let's discern the difference. Comping for me is great. I'd rather someone sing 37 times and get a little bit of the magic and not to use any auto-tune or any timing and just be like, wow, you did this weird thing with your voice, but that sounds awesome, versus you're sitting there and you're quantizing things, you're fixing the pitch, and you're stripping all of the humanity out of it. Because the thing is, a lot of the times, and this is how I actually have written a lot of vocals myself, is I will sing something a bunch of times, and to make a master track, I go and find that magic, and then I go, okay, that's how I should sing it, and then use it as an example back to myself. Right. Hey man, learn it that way, and now it don't suck.
Right. I think that's exactly how it's been for however long, 50 years. That is exactly how every record that I've ever done, that's the way we do it. Or you take it home, or, you say, okay, you patch it together, even with a guitar part, and maybe you'll say, okay, take that home and learn it that way and come in fresh the next day with that as your guide. And that's usually worked really well.
Yeah. When it comes to working with some of the songwriters and producers that you find, what are some of the things that you're considering or looking for when you're choosing, like, who specifically to collaborate with on an upcoming EP or song or album? Because it seems like it changes here and there from project to project. Are you looking for some variety in kind of the styles or background? Like, how do you go about choosing those people?
Well, in the case, in one of the co-producers that we worked with, Tommy English, he was suggested to us by Butch Walker. And I figured, well, Butch is not going to, recommend somebody who's, a lot of times, I go on recommendation. I really do. And Tommy recommended the co-producer, Zach Cervini. Because, I don't have the time to sit down and listen to, okay, we're going to work with so-and-so. I'll listen to the last 10 records that he's done. Mm-hmm. I don't, and a good producer or engineer is going to approach your project entirely different than the one he's not going to replicate his previous record. Mm-hmm. So I really go on recommendation mostly, and it's usually very rarely do we find that hasn't worked out.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Zach Cervini is killing it right now though as a producer, and his his mixing ability and everything. He's got like that modern, very hard hitting rock sound absolutely nailed. He's doing
he's brilliant. He's brilliant. And I started to see his name on a lot of different things, and they were very different from each other. And I said, "Oh, who's this guy?" Okay, is he, and I remember taking note of that. And then when Tommy English recommended him, I said, "I know who you're talking about. Let's get him in here." He's great. It's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
For like, we kind of went over the songwriting on the newer material, but for a sonic palette, like, do you guys have a goal or an idea when you go into these newer recordings where you were like, I want this to be a little different than before. I want this to have this element, anything from that direction?
I think that, one of the things that we always tried to do back in the day, even when we were doing Rebel Yell, between Billy, myself, and our producer, Keith Forsey, we always felt that rock records didn't have the bottom end that R&B records had or dance records had. And I remember, you always had to take, because you were recording for vinyl, so you had to take into consideration how much music was on it, because the grooves would get smaller. You couldn't put as much bass on it because the needle would skip out of the grooves. So we were always fighting that, all of our louder tracks had to be at the beginning of the record when the grooves are bigger. So one of the things that really became intriguing to me in modern is, how you can get sub bass, and that's a lot of rap music, and my wife listens to a lot of that stuff, and it's always like those subs on that is incredible. So we're always like going, I know whenever we get to the chorus, and I did ask Zach Cervini about it, okay, how do we get sub bass on that? That's one of the things I noticed about his productions. Oh, you're using synth bass to double the
that was an epiphany. I went and played a new Muse record for Corey, and I said, "Dude, how the fuck?" And he was like, "What they do is they take keyboard and then they double." And so we did that for our new song. I was like, "Oh, the sonic power of just like playing clean. That's amazing."
And here's the power of the computer, because you can automate your mix so that when that chorus hits, that maybe you carve out a space out of your kick drum and out of your bass guitar for that synth to suddenly take over, and suddenly your chorus is like slamming. And you couldn't do that back in the day. You couldn't see it visually where that frequency should reside. That's what's great about computers.
Listen, we were told not to do this by Jonathan Weiner, the incredible mastering engineer, but I put high pass filters on everything other than two instruments, and that's kick drum and bass, and they get to live wherever they want to live, and fuck all of you below 100.
Yeah, just get rid of all the other instruments. Just kick, drum, bass, and vocals. That's all you're really need anyways. And you got a Billie Eilish record, and you're good.
As a guitar player, I really resent that.
So, well, let me ask you this. So now that you're in Vegas and that you guys get to hang out, you get to go sleep in your own bed, you don't have the crew like loading out every single night. Do you think it's more conducive to writing songs and like crafting more material to choose from? Because you said it's like fresh, and it used to take a long time to do a record, and now you could have a song out in a month if you wanted to.
Absolutely, and it's more topical. We were always afraid of writing about current events or things like that. We steered away from it because who the fuck knows where the world's going to be in 10 months' time when the record comes out. Mm-hmm. Well, now you can write things that are current and pertain to things, that are happening in your life at the moment. So, as Billy says, our latest single, Cage, was really about breaking out of the pandemic and feeling like we're going to go. Okay, we know we're going to go out and tour. We're going to go play. We got this new song, this single, and it's very representative of getting out of the fucking COVID quarantine. And we weren't afraid to put that out because it is current.
Yeah.
By the way, that's also the name of the EP, and I was a little bit upset because I wanted the signed version from like Talk Shop Live, and I usually find that shit out right away, and you sold out immediately, and it pissed me off because apparently you're still...
Talk to me afterwards. I might know a guy.
Okay. I don't know if I have any more wall space because my fiance... Actually, true story, she made me take my David Bowie paintings down off of my wall above my bed. Oh, no, they're over here, but she was like, they're ugly, and I'm like, but they're... and they're the artist proof from David, and I was like, no. So now it's all been relegated, so I have to be very sparse. But I would love to have a Billy Idol record on my wall.
Okay, I got to ask you. Behind you, it's a picture of a band by your Les Paul, the recording one. Yeah, the black and white. Yeah. Who is that?
That's Queen. Signed by Roger Taylor and Brian May. The Hot Space record up there, which you could see the bottom of, is signed by Freddie. That's the only one I have by Freddie, but it's a huge Freddie autograph. Because I'm a nerd. Because here's the thing, Steve.
It's great, man.
This is my temple. Because let me give you an example. I've had a bunch of people that Glenn Hughes, Barry Goudreau, David Ellison. They all see my house from the outside and they're like, "Why did I get dragged down to this dude's house?" But they walk here. They walk down here and they see my 150 guitars, my grand piano, my Yesterday and Today Beatles record, all this stuff, my Van Halen signed shit, and they're like, "This dude, he lives this. He sleeps with the rats, but he plays vintage Les Pauls, and he has no fucks given about sound." And that's my religion, dude.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no more to that. There's not a question. It's just me saying.
That's cool. I mean, it's good to keep your heroes up there. I got to tell you an amazing thing. So we just finished. I'm going to boast here for a minute. So
do it up.
This is a big deal to me. So we just finished about 10 dates in the UK. We just got back, last week, and one of our supporting acts was Toya Wilcox. She's married to Robert Fripp from King Crimson.
That's why people are asking. I was going to say that's why people ask about King Crimson and vintage 70s stuff, because they do songs together. Continue.
So I'm a huge King Crimson fan. Had from the very beginning, had all the records up on my walls, and so I'm like hoping that I'm going to meet Robert Fripp, one of my heroes. Not only do I meet him, he writes me a letter, a handwritten letter. I'm not going to say too much about what he said in it, and then posts on Instagram about how amazing a musician I am. And now Robert doesn't do this kind of stuff. He doesn't even take photos with people. I was a little reticent about asking him for a photo. So we hope you don't mind, just like, and the way that I won him over, because I'm such a fan, is I named. Now, before he was in King Crimson, I wanted him to know I knew the history. So before he was in King Crimson, he was in a band called Giles and Fripp. Okay. They put out eventually a record of their demos, which was done at this house. And I started to name the songs on the demos. And he knew. I said, I'm a real fan. I know about those. So he realized I was really, and it just blew my mind. And it's just like my wife. I'm like, I am no longer taking out the garbage. I am no longer flushing the toilet. I'm a god now. Robert Fripp said I'm great. Now that's it. So
now for Siobhan that doesn't understand the incredible nature of Robert Fripp, he came up with this thing called Fripptronics. A little bit pretentious, yes, but it was all this overdubbing and crazy. Like Tom Scholz and Eddie Van Halen, coming up with all these ideas. This guy from this band called King Crimson was like, "Hold my beer," and he basically just took over the prog world, and now is married to Toya, who's an amazing singer but has big boobs. And they go online, and it's the craziest, most insane. I encourage. It's called Lunch with Toya and Robert. And basically Robert Fripp, who is a Jedi guitarist.
Yeah.
We'll cover and she's an incredible, like absolutely wonderful. Her pedigree's incredible. Comes out with her boobs like taped up or whatever, and they'll do Rage Against the Machine for a minute and a half, and it's like this performance art that you can't look away from. And I gotta tell you, if no one knew who Robert Fripp was a few years ago, well, they do now.
I mean, he's the guitarist on Heroes, David Bowie's Heroes, and Scary Monsters. And for anyone that, I mean, he's had about 5 different versions of the band, and every version has just been incredible. And he's, he's one of those guitar players that is what he does is so specialized. And for me, as a kid, what it represented is, before I had figured it out, I had taken classical guitar lessons, some jazz lessons, some flamenco, but how does that apply to rock and roll? It doesn't, it's nothing like Eric Clapton or anything. Well, when I heard Robert Fripp, he was taking all these elements and he showed a way, like a blueprint of how you can use these elements. And for me, that was huge. It's like it opened up a whole Pandora's box of musicality. And I still refer to, what would Robert Fripp do?
That's interesting. Yeah, because I come from the classical world, and I've dabbled a little bit in jazz and other things just to get inspiration for songwriting. So, and I haven't figured out how to use that at all.
His great quote was, they said, how did you come about your guitar style? He said, I combined Bartok with Jimi Hendrix. So
nice. I love that.
But this also goes back to your brain freezes, like probably when you're like 20 years old, you were rocking to King Crimson. Yeah. You know what I mean? So forever Dimebag Darrell and Zakk Wylde and Eddie Van Halen, will look over my shoulder. But, and for years to come, it's going to be, the Steve Stevens. And then it's going to be, Tosin Abasi, and all these newer guys are going to be the new dudes looking over your shoulder going, what would Tosin do? Right. So but it's interesting, you go back to Robert Fripp, who again, like he could walk down the street in the United States and no one has any freaking idea who he is.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? And meanwhile, who everyone recognizes you. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where it's like, it's amazing to see how much reverence you have, but you're keeping that alive through your playing. And I think that that's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, like you touched on an important thing, is that music, the music that you discover from the time you're adolescence, probably about 12 to about 14 or 15, like think of all the things that are happening in your life at that time. You're discovering sex, you're discovering drugs, you're discovering music, and that is imprinted on your brain and it'll never leave.
You have those experiences. Yeah. I heard Brian May. I'm like, holy shit. Then I heard Dimebag Darrell. I went to my teacher and I said, how do you make that squeal? Like, is that a thing? And like, and then you all have those. And then Yngwie Malmsteen comes in. You're like, that's possible. And then Randy Rhoads did it, very, very much more ornately and nicely. And then that's when you start to figure out no one else matters. And then and those are the people that live in your head for however long.
It'll always be that way. Always.
Yeah, it's wild.
You live in my head, though, so that's just so you know. You live in my head with a ray gun. That's what I think about every single time.
Here's the thing, and I had said this, and then I saw Angus Young say the same thing. The feeling that I got when I went to see my first concerts when I was 13 or 14 years old, Madison Square Garden, the impression that they had on me is. I try and tap into that feeling when I'm on stage and try and give that feeling to the audience. I'm not always successful at it, and not everybody in the audience is a 14-year-old kid like me, but I'm at least trying to tap into what I felt when I watched a band when I was that age, and not just think, what's in catering tonight, and what's the gross, and what's our net tonight, and how long's the bus ride. I try and forget all that crap and just put myself in the headspace that I was at when I was 14 years old for that 2 hours that I'm up there. And I saw Angus say the same thing when he would go see the first time he saw Chuck Berry or even Led Zeppelin, he's tapping into that. Even as huge an artist as he is, and as a monumental guitar player, he's still that same kid. So that will never change.
That's awesome.
Well put. And we're coming up on the end here, so we want to definitely give a promo again. The residency is coming back for the first time since COVID. Is that what it is?
Yeah, for us. Yeah.
So in Vegas,
They've
make sure you guys
broken
go
out
check.
of the cage, which
That's
is the
exactly
new EP.
right. Breaking out of the cage.
It's not a metaphor. It really happened. Although there might be a cage. Who knows? If you go to Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays on YouTube.
We thought about that. We thought, big production. We'll have this fucking cage. Billy will come out of the cage. And
but then Stonehenge just came down slowly.
The 2-foot Stonehenge.
Yeah, right.
Anything else you want to let our listeners or viewers know about? Any other projects outside?
I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, but I have a new Friedman amplifier we just released for all the gear nerds. Friedman SSDL Deluxe, and I've been touring with that. And it's an awesome amplifier. I still have my guitars with Nags that are available. If you go to Nags Guitars, KNAGGS, part of proceeds go to Music Cares, which is helps musicians with substance abuse problems. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff, but catch me on Instagram, or I try and keep that current, and Facebook and Instagram. There's always stuff going on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Steve. And I have
Thanks,
so
guys.
many more questions, but I appreciate you taking the time as always.
Thanks, baby. You guys are great. I enjoy doing it.
Oh, thank you. No, it's awesome to have you back, really.
Yeah. So you were just on the road?
So I'm actually still technically on the road, but we had a rare 2 days off where we ended in Florida.
Gotcha.
And it was close enough where I could come home. So I'm in my apartment right now until tomorrow morning. We got like another week left. We're doing a small acoustic tour right now.
Awesome.
So It's fun. It's really cool. Just afternoon shows, low key for like a lot of our big fans. So it's capped at 150 people.
Right.
Super cool. It's a lot of fun.
Great. Awesome. Well, one day I'll come see you.
For sure. I'll let you know. I guess next time we're in Vegas, I suppose I'll let you know, or
please do
share my schedule. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks, guys.
I keep thinking I'm trying to think of a way to get all the musicians to pull their heads out of their asses and leave, what's it called? Apple Music and Spotify.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like take the power back, because there's literally one dude who owns Spotify who's got $32 billion fucking dollars.
Yeah.
And he's just a dickhead who went, hey, I'll make these guys, these record companies sign a contract with me, and we'll get all the money, and all the artists will be broke for the rest of their lives. And, there's probably people that are hearing this going, man, fuck Satchel. He doesn't want to give away his music for free. But there will be a day when nobody will be making music anymore. And you're in the period right now where it's all dying.